So she said, I love this and I absolutely agree. Online dating is trash. Brittany, honestly, I'd love for you to start from the beginning and go from there. So maybe explain what happened and what you learned about yourself from each guy. And I think that is a good idea. Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So I'm moving on in my dating series. Also, today's innate drink is a pretend margarita. It is just that jalapeno lime juice I'm always talking about from Trader Joe's. I pretend like it's a margarita because it really does taste like a spicy marg. So yeah, anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into today's video. So I absolutely love using you guys' comments and feedback to fuel my content. And so one of you said on the last video, I'll just read it. I'll just read what you said. Okay, so she said, I love this and I absolutely agree. Online dating is trash. Brittany, honestly, I'd love for you to start from the beginning and go from there. So maybe explain what happened and what you learned about yourself from each guy. And I think that is a good idea. Let me just preface this by saying, obviously I'm not going to say names. I'm going to keep things pretty, vague because I want to respect people's privacy, but I don't know why I've been afraid to share the actual truth of my past dating and like a lot of the trauma that I'm actually currently still healing from because of these guys that were, full disclosure, trash. Really awful. Or no, I shouldn't say trash. Just not good for me. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So after my divorce, I took some time and I didn't date or do any of that, like I said in the last video. If you missed that, be sure to catch up. I will leave those videos in the description box so that you can catch up on the series. So I took time off before I got on dating apps, but then I discovered Bumble. And wow, should I not have discovered that app. So I got on Bumble one night with a friend. We had a couple drinks and we just thought it would be fun to make a profile for each other as a joke. And so I made a profile and I ended up getting like a lot of, people. And so the next day I was like, okay, maybe I'll go on some dates. Maybe I'll talk to some people, who knows. So I ended up going on a date with this guy. We will call him, I don't know. We'll call him Charlie. There's no Charlie in my history, so please don't try to go down that rabbit hole. There's no Charlie. Also, sorry to all the good Charlies, okay? Okay, so anyway, this guy named Charlie, we went on a date. He seemed like a reputable guy. Also, looking back, I'm just laughing at myself because I really just went with the first person that was interested. I hadn't dated since my 20s. I mean, I was married for 7 years. There were no dating apps when I got married, and that was just a new world for me. So I'm really gullible, really just naive, and I was just like, oh, he's so nice, and he said all the right things like they always do, and I was just like, cool. So we started going on dates. Things were going pretty well. And then I started noticing some red flags. He just seemed to have a lot of anger issues and I don't know. There was just a lot of things that I was like, whoa. And I really should have just walked away, but I'm such a loyal person and I was like, we can make it work. We can make it work. We can work with this. And so I just continued on and it was terrible. He ended up cheating on me with a stripper. Yeah, you heard that right. Cheated on me with a stripper. Also found out that he had a substance abuse problem that he did not tell me about, and that was really scary. There's just a lot of scary things. So I finally broke up with that guy. Definitely was damaged from that, but did I take the time to heal? No, I was like, oh well, on to the next. So I took, I think 3 or 4 months off. And then I got really lonely again and was just like, let me get back on the dating apps. And so I got back on. I used to play this game. This is going to sound so dumb. I used to play this game where I would be like, oh, I have an event on Friday. Let me see if I can get a date to the event just for fun, like a casual date. And so that's kind of how this was. I had an event that Friday. It was something I'd been invited to. And I was like, I just want to go with a date. Let me see if I can get a Bumble date in time. And so I matched this guy and we'll call him Jimmy. Matched with this guy named Jimmy. And Jimmy seemed really cool. He was bilingual, and I think that was something I really liked. He spoke Spanish. And Spanish, for those of you who don't know, my dad is a first-generation American from Panama. He was born in Panama, and my grandparents spoke fluent Spanish. And so Spanish is just a language that is so beautiful to me, and I have a soft spot for anyone who speaks Spanish. So he was bilingual, seemed really reputable. He was in finance. He really had his act together. He had this beautiful loft. Like, he came across like he did very well for himself. Also had a child the same age as one of my kids at the time. And so it seemed like a good fit. This was the first guy I had dated who had a kid. And I was just like, that's kind of nice, you know? It's kind of nice dating someone who's also in the same space as you and can kind of relate. And so we, you know, started casually dating. And here's where the red flags popped up. He was really communicative and he seemed really interested, but then there would be times where he would just sort of ghost. And this is after we started exclusively dating. You know, when you're casually dating, you know, you go on a date here or there, you don't necessarily talk every day and you don't expect to like know what the person's up to. You know, you're just casually dating. But once you are in more of a secure relationship where you're both exclusively dating, it's like, okay, we're boyfriend, girlfriend now. So after we had casually dated for a bit, we became exclusive. And I remember there would be nights where he would just kind of just disappear. Like, we weren't planning to hang out or anything, but I would just like message him at like 6 or 6:30 and text and be like, hey, what's up? You know, how's it going? How was your day? And I would just hear nothing from him until like the next morning. And it's not major. It's not like, you know, I need a play-by-play of everything you're doing, but it was just odd. And so I'd be like, hey, is everything okay? Like, I didn't hear from you last night. Like, I texted you a couple times. And he'd be like, oh, I fell asleep. And I'm like, at 6:30? Okay. So just little things like that. And then there were times where he just wasn't, I don't know, it's just my intuition. Actually, I think that's a lot of it. My intuition was always just kind of like, there's something off about this guy. But I kept ignoring that because I really liked him and I had created this whole thing in my head. And here's where I want to stop. I created this whole story in my head. This whole like, this is who I saw him as. This is where I saw us being. I kind of was like, he has a kid. I have children. We're really meshing. We could be a little blended family. Like, I just had this whole idea. And so instead of really looking at the signs and looking at what he was showing and seeing like, and actually seeing if the words he was saying were matching up with his actions, I was just like, oh, well, it'll work. Okay, so another thing that was kind of weird, another little red flag thing. When I would stay over, I would notice that he would always keep his phone in this bedroom downstairs when we'd go to sleep. And I remember asking him about it one time. I was like, oh, you always keep your phone in literally the bedroom, like downstairs, like a guest bedroom. And he was just like, oh yeah, I just don't like having my phone in by my bed or whatever. And I was like, okay, but it just seemed odd. Another little like weird thing, like weird. Then I found out he had like multiple phones, which again, people could have multiple phones. That's fine. It doesn't mean there's anything shady, but in his case, it was weird because I was like, oh, you know, he had one number and then I remember we were out one time and he was like putting our name in for a reservation and he gave a different number. And this was after we had been dating for months. Like, it wasn't like we were just new. It was like we had been exclusive for a while, where you think you would have like known that your partner has another number and another phone and all that, but I just didn't know. So he was like, so I just remember at dinner, I was kind of like, oh, you have another, like a whole nother phone, a whole nother number. And he was like, oh yeah, it's just like a work thing or whatever. And I was like, okay. So one day I was over at his house and he went to take his dog out. I am a silly person, okay? I like pranks, I like being silly. So I decided I was gonna hide in his guest room and like jump out when he came back inside or like, you know, whatever. Just cause I'm like, you know, I'm an actual child at the end of the day. So I go into his guest room and I'm in there trying to find a good hiding space and he has a bunch of boxes in there. He wasn't from Kansas City. He, during like the whole 2020 mess of, you know, COVID and quarantine, he was originally from New York and he moved here for a job. So when we met, he was recently like new to Kansas City and meeting people, and so he hadn't been in his apartment that long. So he actually still had boxes and stuff in one of his guest rooms, which made sense. So anyway, I was in there hiding and I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait and jump out when he comes. And as I was hiding, I saw a box. It was open. I didn't open it. But inside I saw a white robe, like a woman's robe. You know those robes that you wear when you're getting married and they say like Mrs. blah, 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 like the last name of the person, or it says like bride or whatever? It was one of those. Now this is weird. This is weird because I knew that he had been married before because he had a daughter and he told me he was divorced, so that all added up. But he told me it was years ago. It was like, he was like, oh, we've been divorced for like, 8 years or 7 years or, a while. So in my mind, I'm like, maybe he's just really nostalgic and he just saved this all the way from his marriage. But then, okay, and this is where I did get a little nosy because I saw, the word was there and I just like looked at it and was like, oh, that's weird. And then inside the box, there were some mugs and like other things that you get when you're engaged and you like give them out as like little gifts. And there were like engagement pictures and it was him and a black woman. And that's where I was like, wait, because his daughter is not biracial. So I knew his ex-wife was white. So I was like, who it is? Because like he never told me that he was engaged or anything. So I was just like, maybe this is from years and years ago. Who knows? I don't know. It's none of my business. So I had two choices. One choice was I could put everything back and just be like, Britt, it was none of your business. Just act like you didn't see it and just move on. Or to ask him about it. Which choice did you think I did, y'all? Of course I did too. I took that stuff out, I laid it on the counter, and when he walked in, I was like, what? Stuff's not adding up, and it's kind of weird when you're dating someone and you tell them, we had really had in-depth conversations about our past and like, do we want to get married again and da-da-da-da, and like all these really like pretty intimate things. And so I'm like, this is a really big thing to completely leave out like a whole engagement, or I don't even know. So of course he comes back in and I'm just kind of like, what is this about? And according to him, he was like, okay, I guess I should have been honest. I was engaged a year ago. We called off the wedding, blah, blah, blah. I'm really sorry I didn't tell you. He gave this whole sob story about how, they just weren't meant for each other. And so they called it off, but he just never got rid of all the stuff, but he's totally over it. And, he wishes her well, blah, blah, blah. So I really probably should have just been like, there's just something off. Between all the other things, now this, my intuition, like, things aren't adding up. But again, I was just in this control. I want this to work. I'm gonna make it work. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. I just want to be happy. I don't want to deal with it. So I was just kind of like, well, maybe that's true. And like, that makes sense. So I just kind of was like, okay. But I was like, please be honest. Like, I was upset that he wasn't honest about it. Like, he didn't talk about it, or not honest, but he just wasn't forthcoming with it. And I was just like, well, is there more to the story? Like, is there more you need to tell me? And he was like, no, that's it. I just didn't want you to think that like I was not over it. So I moved on, but part of me was still a little bit like, And you guys, something you should know about me, I am an actual detective. I can find out anything. And unfortunately, it's because I've had to deal with this kind of thing in the past. So let me just say, you can find out a lot from Venmo. But no, y'all, I have found out some serious tea from Venmo, from just like, not stalking people, but like looking at their Venmo, So let me just say, things didn't add up to me, and I started doing my own research. He wasn't on social, which is also like kind of weird, but not weird, because some people aren't on social, but he was like really big about not wanting his picture on social. And I was just like, why? And he was just like, well, because my, the ex-fiance, I just don't really want her to see my stuff. And like, I just don't, that should have been an alert right there. Like, what are you talking about? So I ended up finding out so many things about this guy. Not only was this guy lying about the whole fiance thing, he was cheating on me the entire time. So long story short, I ended up finding out that he was married a second time. And he got married literally like a month or two before moving here. And then his wife found out that he had cheated on her their entire relationship with hookers, escorts. She found emails. And you want to know how I found this out? I found her. I found her through my own research. I found her, and I ended up being like, wait a second. And I reached out to her, and she told me everything. She was like, this guy ruined my entire life. She was like, I met him, I want to say like 2-3 years ago. She told me the whole story. It was so sad. Beautiful black woman, so successful, lived in New York together, had this whole life together, and he was cheating on her the entire time. asked her to marry him. They went on this like beautiful trip. They had a beautiful life together. They had moved in together, like all of this. And then she found like an email from one of the escorts, and this was during like quarantine when they were like all, I think they were staying with family or something. I don't know. All that to say, it was really traumatic. And she told me all this and I was like, are you kidding me? And she was like, if I were you, I would get as far away from that man as humanly possible. He is absolutely dishonest. He is a terrible person. He is absolutely no good. He's awful. And she told me everything, and she like gave receipts. And so I truly was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I was right. My intuition was right. And so after I found all that out, I was like, wait, so are you guys actually divorced, or are you still married? Because I had no idea. I mean, him and I were dating, but she was like, no, we literally just finalized our divorce last month. What? You guys, it was like a freaking movie. I'm not even giving every detail. There's like way more details, but I'm not gonna even give all that because I feel like I'm already giving too much. But like, let me just say there was a lot. It was extremely crazy, toxic, a mess. So of course I break up with him, and I'm just like, what a psychopath. Like, are you kidding me right now? And I told him about it, and he of course tried, he didn't deny it, but he was just like, I'm so sorry, I've changed, I'm not that way anymore, this and that. He was definitely still doing the same exact thing to me, like, for sure. I like look back now on like times where I went over there, and I know for a fact that, like, you know, in your mind, you're like, I don't think that's my hair tie. Like, I don't think I ever left a hair tie like that here. And then they like gaslight you, and they're like, that's your hair tie, what are you talking about? And the sad thing is, this is not trying to be mean. This guy, I don't even know how he was cheating, because like, I was like, I'm not trying to be mean, but like, I was way out of his league. Like, I'm embarrassed now that I was even dating him. So unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. After I broke up with him, this guy proceeded to stalk me. And that's where things kind of aren't as funny and silly, because I didn't take it as serious as I should have. And when it starts happening to you, you don't realize, like, you don't think that's gonna be you. You don't think like, wait, this guy keeps showing up and I just broke up with him. He's stalking me. Like, in your mind, you're just like, oh, it's just I don't know. I don't know. It wasn't like he was like aggressive or dangerous. He would just show up. Like, for example, we broke up. I was like, we're done. I don't want to see you anymore. And then he would literally just like come over, like come to my house, just like show up at my door and like knock on the door. I'm just like, why are you here? Like, the first time he did it, I was like, why are you here? We're broken up. And he would be like, oh, I know, I just wanted to like see you and just make sure you really were sure. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, you should leave. And then he would just like pop up again. In my mind, I know you're like, Britt, why didn't you just call the cops and be like, this guy's here? In my mind, I just was like, maybe I'm too nice, but I was just like, I don't know, maybe I just need to get it through this guy's head, or I just didn't connect the two. It wasn't until I went out to dinner, or went out to brunch with one of my guy friends, one of my really good friends, and I never post my social in real time. And this is why, for safety reasons. I mean, rarely, and especially not when I'm with the kids. The only time you'll really ever see me post in real time is if I'm at an event where I've contractually said I would post, and it's like a live event, and there's people there and there's safety and like that. Even then, I don't love doing it. If I partner with someone, I always let them know, hey, I will capture the content and I will most likely post, the next day or when I'm not there. So I went to brunch with my guy friend, and we had a great brunch. It was a local spot that I love going to, and I took pictures of food and all that. You guys know I love sharing my content of places I go. It's just fun for me. So after we left, I posted my stuff on Instagram stories, and I put the restaurant, because I love to highlight local places, and so I tagged the restaurant, was like, oh, I had this, it was so good, Wasn't there, thankfully, when I posted. I get a message from the restaurant, you guys, like 30 minutes later, and they're like, hey, we just want to let you know a guy came in with another guy, and they were asking about you. They were like, is she here? We want to see, was she here? And I'm like, what? And they were like, yeah, we just wanted you to know for safety, like we did not tell them anything, we did not give them any information, but we just wanted you to know that they were like asking. And that's where I was like, that is freaking not cool. Like, that is crazy. You're gonna show up demanding or asking, like, what did you even expect? Like, what if I had been there? Like, what was he gonna do? So that's where I ended up being like, okay, cool, I gotta take legal action. Like, this guy's psychotic. Yeah, it really messed me up. Rightly so. I definitely had PTSD because of that, and I didn't even realize that until months after everything subsided. Thankfully, he moved away. He doesn't live here anymore, and you know, everything was taken care of. But mentally and emotionally, I was so not okay. I was so not okay. It just felt so, I just felt so out of control. I felt like my power had been taken from me. I felt like not only had I been used and abused, but then when I tried to get away, I couldn't. And it didn't make sense. I'm like, you were cheating and being psychotic. Why are you stalking me now that I broke up with you? Go be with all the psycho bimbos you wanted to be with. And it just was awful. And so I had been in therapy, but then, you know, COVID and all that, the therapist I'd gone to years ago I didn't have. And so I was like, I need to get into therapy. And that's when I was like, I have to find another therapist. And so I did. And that's when I stepped back from YouTube, full disclosure, because I just was so unwell mentally. I couldn't even really do videos anymore. I just didn't feel comfortable. And now looking back, it was because I didn't feel safe. It was just a lot of things. And PTSD is a complicated thing. Oh my gosh. If you have ever had it or you have it, you struggle with it, it is a thing that you don't even realize you probably have until you have outbursts or crazy things that happen and you're like, whoa, what's going on? And then you're like, oh, okay. So thankfully through like therapy and things like that, I really made progress, and I had a lot of breakthroughs, a lot of healing. But these are things I'm still working through because of these guys I dated. So I'm just here to tell you, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And if you're in a place where you're like, I don't want to be alone, I'm afraid I'm always going to be alone. And so I feel like I need to be out dating, I need to do this, I need to do that, or I need to stay in these toxic places. You don't. You don't. Okay? You don't. Choose yourself and trust the universe that there is a good person for you. I think that I was really in a scarcity mentality. I was really at that time kind of just like, this is all I have, and these are the only options. And it took, unfortunately, really damaging myself to finally get real with myself and say, girl, this is not it. This is not it. And so after that, I finally was like, I'm done. I got off a dating app. That is the story. That is not something I'm necessarily proud of, but it is part of my story. And I'm sharing this because if it can save one person from going through what I went through or make one person feel less alone, I'm here for that. I will say my mental health has struggled a lot over the years due to trauma and emotional abuse. And that's crazy to say out loud. And I'm not sharing any of this to be a victim or to negate my own role in it, because we all have to own our own part. I offer myself so much forgiveness because you can only do as well as you know at the time. And so this is not an opportunity for you to bash yourself or for you to feel shame or to be like, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? No, that's actually the opposite. I just want to share this because I want you to know you're not alone. But I also want you to know that there's a huge difference between being alone and being lonely. And sometimes healing takes you on a path alone. But it doesn't mean you're alone. It just means that it's meant for you to do alone, if you know what I mean. And so now that I'm navigating life past that and trying to move past that, healthy relationships bring up triggers too, and that's something I'm realizing, and it's really been hard, is like you don't realize sometimes some of the triggers you have and some of the trauma until you are in a good relationship, and then things pop up and you're like, whoa. So anyway, that is the story. I plan to continue sharing more on this series. Please leave any questions or comments you have. And I just want to say, if you are also journeying through PTSD, trauma, emotional, physical abuse, any of that, I know so many of you come from really hard places. Please know you're not alone, okay? First of all, you're not alone. Secondly, it's not always going to be this hard. Choosing to heal from trauma is exhausting. It's exhausting and it's difficult and it's hard, but it's so worth it, and you deserve that, okay? So if you're in a point right now where you're like, I'm shattered, I'm on the ground, I don't even know how to begin to heal again, I'm here to say, start with you, start with pouring into you, start with therapy if you can afford it, of any kind. Start with you, literally with you. Some things that I've kind of been trying to do to help in my healing journey, not only just therapy, but I stopped drinking because drinking really messes with my mental state and my mood regulation, mixed with PTSD, trauma, ADHD, neurodivergence. Like, that is one of the main reasons I stopped drinking, was it just wasn't mixing well. Another thing, I used to partake in gardening, and I don't do that anymore, if you know what I mean. Because I realized that was also kind of, I thought that, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on the internet, but like the green things, which is legal where I live. It's totally legal where I live, but I kind of was using it as like a self-medicating thing. Like it helped my ADHD, it helped with my anxiety, and so I was relying on that. Even though I wasn't drinking anymore, I was still relying on that, and I've stopped that as well, because it just, my brain, for me personally, needs nothing else to mess with it. Being completely sober, I've realized, is really one of the best ways for me to take care of my mental health. I've realized I have to treat my mental health like people who have diabetes or other, you know, serious illnesses where they have to keep on them daily, weekly, check in, check outs, all that. I realize now I have to do that, or else I'm not okay. So some things that have helped me, because there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Stepping away from dating helped a lot. Getting off of dating apps, focusing on things that made me happy, that made me feel fulfilled. Going to therapy, talking and opening up to friends about it, and telling people, because it's scary and it's embarrassing. Mental health is so lonely sometimes. When you struggle with it, it's lonely. It's hard to say, hey, I'm having a really hard time right now. Like, I'm really not okay. It's hard to do that because we live in a society where everyone's either too busy to care, or we're all struggling with something, or it's just, you just don't want to be the one who's always having a problem. But I'm just here to say, talk about it, because keeping it in will not help. And do everything in your power to release that, okay? Also, be kind to yourself. Do not shame yourself because you were with someone who was abusing you, or you were with someone who gave you PTSD. Like, that is not all you. That is not your fault, and that is not for you to carry, that shame. And the more you carry that, the less you will have space to heal and to make room for new. Wow, I really feel like I overshared, but I'm gonna put this up and hopefully not regret it. I appreciate you guys, those of you who have been here for all of this, all the ups and the downs and the crazy. I appreciate you so much, and I'm gonna continue sharing my journey because I want it to help someone, not because I think that I'm the person to look up to or the person of perfection. I am so far from perfect. I'm so far from being here, you know, I am so far from that, but I'm doing my very best to heal and to make positive changes to be a better person. And I'm sharing this along the way to help anyone else. So that's all. Thanks for watching if you made it through the whole thing. I appreciate you. And I will talk to you on the next video.